welcome to Hardtalk India. The Prime Minister calls him the best defence minister India's ever had. The opposition say he's the most controversial. In a few months' time, he will in fact become the longest-serving defence minister in independent India's history. The challenge he faces is to respond to the concerns of the defence establishment, and those are the issues I shall take up today with Defence Minister George Fernandes. Mr. Fernandes, let me start with your claim that you intend to sue Sonia Gandhi for sedition because of the allegation that you've made money out of what the press call Coffingate. Are you serious, or is that just a political threat?
No, it's not a threat. The way the leader of the opposition has been going about with this particular issue has had a very bad impact on the morale of the troops. And this because it's a lie that is being perpetrated. This whole issue of purchase of not coffins, but caskets. She doesn't even know the difference between coffin and casket. Was taken up a long time before I got into the ministry. And this transaction was not a transaction of the Ministry of Defence, but it was done at the level of the Army headquarters.
So you're saying that she's wrong in fact, and that she's also maligning your name?
That's right.
In which case, why don't you sue her for libel? Why sedition?
For the simple reason that this lie is affecting the morale of the troops. However, how exactly one should proceed against her is something I'm leaving to my lawyers to decide.
So is it possible that in the end, on their advice, you may not sue her for sedition, you may switch to libel?
That will depend on what they tell me finally.
So there is a possibility that the eventual case will be not for libel but something else. Sorry, not for sedition but something else.
The decision will be of the lawyers.
Because you know what the press says, if you insist upon suing her for sedition, this, they say, is an example of the delusion of grandeur. They're saying this is the madness of King George.
Well, the press is also to that extent a partner in this exercise, because the press knew all available material was passed on to them when this whole thing was blown up in Parliament. And yet, till date, the press continues to talk about Coffin Gate. There is no Coffin Gate. ₹1.5 crore is what went into the purchase of this. And on this we are supposed to have made money on the blood of the martyrs.
You sound as if you think people are deliberately picking on you, as if this is a personal vendetta against you.
Well, I won't use that word. But the fact, I'm only saying the fact. It's there before everyone.
Mr. Fernandes, you're one of the most experienced politicians in India. You've been a minister for a quarter of a century. Why have you suddenly become so sensitive to personal attacks?
It is not a question of personal attack. If I do something wrong, you attack me. If I have done nothing, you can't start promoting a lie and carry it on right across the world.
You know, the irony is that your critics say that he's hugely overreacting to Sonia Gandhi's allegations, which he himself says are false, but when it comes to the real concerns of the service chiefs, that in fact defence procurement is in a mess, that their services are suffering, he isn't half as concerned about that.
Whoever is saying that doesn't know what defence procurement is and what the defence has had since I have become the Minister of Defence.
Okay, let's look at some of the facts. The Army is short of simple things like bulletproof vests. The Air Force is short of simple things like a range of ammunition. Yet the defence budget is falling, and even within that, the money allocated is often not spent.
The defence budget is not falling. The defence budget over the years, in the last 5 years, has gone up many times more than what it was in the earlier years.
Forgive me, Mr. Fernandes. In 1988, the defence expenditure was 3.38% of GDP. This year, it is just 2.28%.
Look at what the GDP was in 1988 or 98. Look at the GDP and then take these figures.
Last year, the Air Force got 42% less than what it asked for. The Army got 22%. And despite that, 2,700 crore was returned unspent.
Well, if money was returned, it is because those items for which it was earmarked were not yet ripe for signing.
What do you mean not yet ripe for signing?
In the sense that the talks that had to, not the talks is not the word here.
Negotiations?
The negotiations had not been completed, and the negotiations take their own time. I don't think the Ministry of Defense can regulate how the negotiation should progress, because there are not just two but more than two sides to it.
Let me quote to you what the generals are saying. They say that senior politicians and senior civil servants are so scared they might be accused of making money that they are refusing to take decisions, and as a result, procurement has ground to a halt.
Well, I have struck my neck out, and I use this term, I'm using it not for the first time. I know that there is a concern among various people within the ministry, but I have struck my neck out, and I have seen to it that anything that has to be procured is procured.
They say that the ministry under George Fernandes is more concerned about protecting itself and its individual reputation rather than protecting the army, which is why papers don't move, which is why things don't become ripe for purchase.
I don't think any sensible person, whether he is in the uniform or otherwise, will say that.
Then let me quote to you General V.P. Malik, the hero of the Kargil war, the army chief that served under you. Thanks to our scams, suspected scams, and prolonged acrimonious debates in Parliament, no civil official is willing to take any decision and expedite purchase of overdue weapons and equipment.
I think he is talking out of turn, and he is talking rubbish. I'm sorry to have to use these words, but he is talking rubbish.
You dismiss it out of hand?
Yes, completely.
What about the fact that it's not just that the money is not being used, it's not just that decisions aren't being taken, but specific funds that were raised for defense purposes, like the National Security Surcharge of 2002, has in fact been used for general expenditure instead.
That is another lie. That is another lie. Whosoever has conveyed it to you, he is lying.
The Parliamentary Standing Committee on Defence, April 2003, in a report submitted to Parliament, says the committee are surprised to observe that funds collected for the specific purpose of national security have become part of general revenues of the government.
No, that's not true.
The Standing Committee of Parliament is lying?
Then the Standing Committee has made a mistake there.
But the Standing Committee is headed by a former cabinet colleague of yours, Madan Lal Khurana.
Yes, Madan Lal Khurana is the chairman of the committee, but what is reported in that is not right.
It's reported that in fact in 2002-2003, 4,253 crore specifically raised for the defense was used instead for general expenditure. Last year the figure was 2,800 crore.
There's no substance in that.
So again, just like you dismissed General Malik's statement, you dismiss the Parliamentary Standing Committee's comments.
Yes.
You actually dismiss them.
Yes.
You therefore say that there is nothing seriously wrong with defense procurement.
There's nothing seriously wrong with procurement.
All right. Sadly, Mr. Fernandes, defense procurement is not the only problem that people say exists. They say that even promises made by you as defense minister have not been fulfilled. They point to the fact that in January 1999, you promised to integrate the civilian staff of the defense ministry with the military, and you said you'd do it within a month. Almost 5 years later, nothing has happened.
Well, that was a mistake on my part, because I was not aware of the size of the problem. I thought this is something which you normally do in any kind of a system where you don't have two different commands, one the civilian and the other the military. I didn't have a clue about that, and that's where I did make a mistake.
You're saying that in fact you made an announcement without fully understanding the subject?
Yes, you may say that.
And you now regret having made it?
I don't have to regret. I have regretted it long back.
You're being remarkably honest, I must tell you that. But your critics say it wasn't a mistake. They say he did it to deflect attention from the controversial sacking of Admiral Bhagwat.
That is another rubbishy bit.
Will integration then happen whilst you are defense minister?
Well, it is in the process of happening, and I would certainly like to see that it happens before the next year is over.
Is that a commitment that you can make?
Well, these commitments are not made in public. These are matters which are decided inside the ministry.
Although you did make a commitment in public in January 99. You don't want to repeat that mistake again.
No, that was also said within the portals of the Defence Ministry.
The service chiefs, both serving and retired, say that if there is one reform that they all want, it's integration. Can you understand their urgency and need for it?
Well, this is something which was decided by the cabinet long back, and the cabinet has been wanting to see that this integration takes place. And if integration has not taken place, it is not it's not only because of the Ministry of Defence. There are other reasons also for that.
But you are saying that it will happen, you hope, by the end of next year.
Yes, it will take a lot of effort on my part and on the part of the government to do that.
But it will happen.
Yes, we mean to do it because this is our decision. We took it as a decision in the cabinet.
The other thing that your critics point to is that he's not going as fast on integration as we'd like him to, but he seems to be committing himself to the creation of a Chief of Defence Staff post, even though the Air Force is strongly against it. Why are you overriding their opposition?
Well, you are contradicting yourself now. You earlier were concerned about this not being done, and now you are saying that the Air Force is coming in the way.
The Air Force is not interested in the Chief of Defence Staff post. They're all in favour of integration of civilian and military staff. They see it as two different things.
Well, you seem to know more about what is happening in the Defence Ministry than I know.
Let me quote to you what Air Chief Marshal Serene, writing in the Indian Express last year, said. He said, this recommendation for the creation of a Chief of Defence Staff, if implemented, would in fact weaken the quality of decision-making at key planning and operational levels and reduce the effectiveness of our defence forces.
So you are supporting that?
No, I'm simply putting this to you as an example of the opposition from the Air Force to the creation of the post of a Chief of Defence Staff.
Yes, the creation of the post of a Defence Staff emerged as a result of serious consideration of these issues by the government and along with the armed forces. It was not a discussion between, it was not a discussion by the government alone, but also by associating the armed forces.
What about the fact that the Air Force is making it crystal clear that 7 of the last Air Force chiefs, and very possibly the present incumbent, except one doesn't know for sure in his case, are against the creation of this post?
Well, people may have different views. Ultimately, one has to go by what is in the best interest of the nation's security.
Do you believe that this post, the CDS, is in the best interest of the nation's security?
If it were not, we wouldn't have taken this decision.
You said in an interview to PTI on the 5th of October earlier this month that this post would come into creation in a few months' time.
Yes.
What is a few months?
Well, few months is few months.
Before 2004?
I say I have made my point that before the next year is over.
Before the next year is over, both integration and the creation of a CDS will happen.
Yes.
One last very quick point before I move to general strategic interests. You also face a lot of criticism for what people say is your lack of sympathy and concern for the rising casualty rate of the MiG-21s. Are you indifferent to them or are you misperceived?
There is no rising accidents or deaths insofar as MiG-21 is concerned.
Can I pick you up on that?
Yeah, go ahead.
There have been 92 MiG-21 crashes since January 2003. 68 of those have happened in the last 5.5 years, 44 in the last 3. That's a sharply rising trend.
You should go back to the time when these MiG-21s were procured. From the time they were procured, there have been regular accidents.
163.
Nobody is supporting accidents. All accidents are accidents as they are. It is the Air Force which decides which aircraft is good enough to fly. These decisions are not taken in the Ministry of Defence. Neither you nor I are competent to understand and pass judgment on the wisdom of those who are manning our Air Force.
Quite right. Neither you nor I are technical experts, and yet is it not a fact that these MiG-21s were supposed to be slowly phased out starting 5 years ago, and that perhaps by 2003 almost as much as 40 or 50% should have been phased out, but that hasn't happened because replacements haven't been found.
Yes, replacement don't take place overnight. Replacements take sometimes decades. Take for instance the AJT.
You've picked a perfect example. Because replacements don't take place overnight and take time, the Air Force is flying obsolescent MiG-21s. Isn't that one reason why they're crashing?
No, I don't agree with that.
The other reason, Air Force chiefs who are retired say, is because the advanced jet trainer, the AGT you mentioned, hasn't been purchased, and the Air Force has been asking for it for 20 years. As a result, MiG-21s are being used for training purposes. Rookie pilots make mistakes and crash.
Yes, you are right when you say that this had been in the offing for 20 years. It took me 5 years to do it. The earlier 15 years went waste.
25% of the delay, therefore, is attributable to you, by your own admission.
No?
It took you 5 years after 20.
Yes, because that's the time that it takes.
Why is procurement so slow? Why does it take so long when lives are being lost?
Well, procurement has to go through a process which is time consuming.
And that's the explanation.
Yes, because you have processes that have been decided by the government and over which there is a lot of supervision by various agencies. And,
the Air Chief Marshals and the Generals say that's politics dragging its feet.
Well, if there are any problems which these retired officers have, they should be conveying them to me rather than conveying them to you.
All right, let's come to something else. 5 years ago, as Defense Minister, you described China as India's potential threat #1. This year, both you and the Prime Minister have paid what the press calls seminal visits to Beijing. Is China still potential threat #1, or have you changed your opinion?
Well, Chinese leadership invited me to China and I chose to go. And there's nothing one has to be apologetic about.
Absolutely, but is China still potential threat #1?
So China wants to be friendly with India. China is seeking India's friendship. And I believe that if someone wants to be friendly with us, we should stretch our hand.
I notice that you're not saying the easy answer that you've changed your mind.
No, there's no question of changing one's mind. There are situations where a nation's security is concerned. There are situations. One deals with the situation. There's no changing of mind here.
So you're saying to me, as Defense Minister, that the reasons 5 years ago that led you to believe China was potential threat #1 still hold?
No, I didn't say that.
So what are you saying?
What I'm saying is that China wants to be India's friend. During our 7 days visit to China, the whole emphasis was on friendship. And if China wants to be India's friend, then India should stretch its hand and be friendly.
Absolutely, but are you stretching your hand to potential threat #1, or would you characterize China differently today?
No, I think in these matters nothing remains static. Things keep changing.
So you have
In
changed your
nations-
opinion.
In the relations between nations, things keep changing.
Let me put this to you. You used to talk 5 years ago about the sense in which Chinese military threats had encircled India. Nothing seems to have changed. They still have a base in Coco Islands. They're still involved with the Burmese army. Their defense installations in Tibet are still a potential threat to India. They're still supplying potential nuclear usable missile technology to Pakistan. They're still developing technology and a presence in the Indian Ocean that could be threatening.
We are
If
also
none-
developing our technology. We are also acquiring weapons. We are also acquiring a whole lot of hardware and software and whatever is needed. So there is nothing in nations preparing themselves to meet any eventuality.
So we're better able to tackle potential threat #1 today than we were 5 years ago.
No, the point I'm making is that when nations have relationships, those relationships can change, those relationships can harden. One has to be prepared for any eventuality.
But you're still
And
not
this
answering
applies
the
not
critical
only to
question.
India and China, this applies to everyone.
But you're still not answering the critical question. Would you still call China potential threat #1?
I don't think that question is relevant at this moment.
In which case, let me put it like this. Is Pakistan today India's potential threat number one?
Well, Pakistan is not just a threat. Pakistan is, at the moment, as you and I are sitting here, our men are on the borders of the country, and there they are trying to keep away the terrorists that get exported to our country.
Your Army Chief General Vij said just a few days ago, maybe a week or 10 days ago, that the Pakistani military leadership was going berserk sending terrorists across the border. Do you agree with his views?
Well, I think he has an opinion, and I respect his opinion.
Do you agree with it?
I said I respect his opinion,
What does that mean?
whatever it means.
You could respect something you disagree with.
Well, I have had my say.
It's not just that the Army Chief says that Pakistan is going berserk, and those were his words. But in the last 4 weeks, Pakistan has carried out at least 3, maybe 4 tests of potential nuclear usable missiles which could be a threat against India. How do you as India's defense minister respond to that?
My response has to be by telling everyone that if anyone is going to talk to us in that language, we are capable of responding in that language.
In other words, we can play the game too. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
You mentioned a moment ago the mobilization of a 1 million-strong army for 9 months along the Pakistan border. What is the state of defense preparedness today along the Indo-Pak border?
At the moment, whatever we need to have, whatever forces we need to deploy, we have deployed.
Has your mobilization gone back to the pre-December 13, 2001 position?
That happened long back.
So in fact, there is normalcy on the border.
I won't say there is normalcy on the border unless you, by normalcy you mean Pakistan constantly firing on our posts and we returning the fire. Pakistan training its, within its borders terrorists and sending them across, and our soldiers either getting shot or shooting them down.
5 years ago, when you used the term potential threat number one for China, I asked you if you thought China was a bigger threat than Pakistan, and you said, yes, I do. Today, let me reverse the question. Is Pakistan a bigger threat to India than China?
Pakistan is not a threat to India. Pakistan is too small a country for us to be afraid of.
Even though, as your army chief says, they're going berserk, sending terrorists across the border?
Yes. These are two different ideas of what we are looking at.
So Pakistan, in military terms, is not a threat to India?
No, it can't be. It will never be.
5 years ago, when I asked you if China was enemy number one, you ended up with the formulation potential threat number one. Let me put that question to you now about Pakistan. Is Pakistan enemy number one for India?
I don't, as I told you then, you asked that question and I said that no, I won't accept China as enemy number one. By the same token, I believe that such questions don't really take us anywhere.
But it is the biggest problem that you face at the moment.
Not at the moment. This problem has been before us since the country was partitioned. How many wars have we fought?
What is the state of cross-border terrorism at the moment? The Prime Minister's April 18 peace initiative hinges upon the cessation of cross-border terrorism. Is it coming down? Is it exactly as it was? Or has it got worse?
Well, it keeps changing. You can't say that today it's at a certain level, tomorrow it could be another level. You never know.
What is the level at the moment?
As it used to be, by and large.
There has been no meaningful change of terrorism in the last 6 months?
No.
None whatsoever?
Not meaningful change. There is change. There are ups and downs, but nothing that is meaningful.
Mr. Advani has been deputed by the government to speak with the Hurriyat conference. You're an expert on Kashmir. Will these be meaningful, substantive talks, or is this just a symbolic gesture?
I believe they will be meaningful.
Will it be a prolonged discussion or just a one-off?
That I'm not able to forecast.
What would you prefer?
I would certainly prefer that they should be discussions that should give us results.
Therefore, they should be protracted if need be.
As they come.
Will Mr. Advani only talk to the Ansari faction of Hurriyat, or will he also talk to Gilani?
I'll have to ask him.
What would your advice be?
I'll have to first find out what exactly the agenda that he has.
Will he also talk to people like Yassin Malik, Shabir Shah?
As I said, I'll have to ask him on that.
Do you accept that if he doesn't
I
talk,
can't lay down the agenda for him.
do you accept that if he doesn't talk to Gilani, Shabir Shah, Yasin Malik, the talks may not have as much credibility as they otherwise would have?
That I don't think I can answer.
George Fernandes, a pleasure having you on Hardtalk India.
Thank you.